So this actually happened to one of my cousins at the time of the story. I'm going to leave her as anonymous as she does not want me to share her public story out there. Now, my cousin at the time was maybe around college year, probably maybe 20 years old. This was around the time when things started to get really insane and crazy. Now, to make it a long story short, my cousin was home alone with her brother, Ver, and they were basically le- playing in some board games and even watching a bit of TV. So far, nothing like this or anything weird has ever happened. But ever since this occurred, she obviously does not know what to think. Now, I can't exactly remember if this was sometime in the 90s or early 2000s, but they were playing some video games when my cousin ends up looking up. Now, she looks up and thinking that she heard something, and she asked her brother if he heard it. Her brother had no idea what she was talking about, so they continued gaming for quite a little while. However, within a little while of gaming, that's when she heard what seemed to be like footsteps. At first, she thought that it could have been maybe some rats or mice upstairs, but it became more apparent that it came more from the attic than upstairs. That's when she ends up going up the attic, and her brother follows suit. As they reach up there in the attic, they looked around, thinking that there could be someone or something in there, but they couldn't really find anything. Now, the attic isn't really that big or anything like that. It definitely was posing some sort of weird stuff. Mainly because the atmosphere of it just feels not really right. Now, my cousin, along with her brother, looked at each other and were confused as to who or what could have made the noise. They called out if somebody was there, but there was no response. This is when they started feeling suddenly very cold. Now, it wasn't freezing outside. It was warm, but it felt really cold inside the attic. They obviously weren't sure as to what it was, but something really seemed off. They ended up looking around the attic, but they couldn't find any source of what could have been making the room cold. There was no resources to figure that out. When my cousin and her brother looked, they obviously couldn't see anybody, but they saw what seemed to be a black blob sat in the corner of the attic. It was in the far part of the attic of the house, and it seemed to be sitting or crouching down. They obviously weren't sure if it was a person or not, but they couldn't make any features as to what this creature was. Whatever it was just sitting there, rocking back and forth as if they were mentally insane. That's when her cousin and my cousin and her brother ended up getting out of the basement. By the time they got out of the basement, their father had came home and they told their father about the incident and said that it was in the attic. Now, the father went upstairs to check the attic, but couldn't seem to find anyone or anything in there. It could have been maybe my cousin's imagination for all we know, but there's no way to know entirely if that was honestly true. My guess is that whatever my cousin and her brother experienced that day was completely paranormal. Now, this is definitely a strange story that occurred to one of my friends at the time of the story. My friend at the time of the story, I'm going to call her Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth at the time was maybe 25 years old, and this took place sometime last year. I'm not obviously sure her when last year took place, but it definitely took place last year. This was around the time when COVID restrictions started not being as strict as they once were back in 2020. Now, at the time, Elizabeth was pretty much working on stuff and mainly just college stuff. However, she was taking a few days off from college to pretty much prepare everything for her exams. This was sometime in the summer where she had recently got out of college. She and her family were going to go to Nebraska to see her extended family there. So she obviously decided to go later as she needed to make sure that the house sitter arrived and got everything under control and ready. When Elizabeth left, she obviously drove the hours on the road. Now, since it was around the summertime, she didn't have anything weather related happening, with the sole exception of maybe some sun and rain. Other times, she definitely never seen anything or really anything abnormal or odd. During her road trips, she always enjoyed them. Basically, getting to relax and basically enjoying the view was definitely something she always enjoyed. Now, as Elizabeth was driving, it was sometime, I believe, somewhere in the US. I can't remember if it was in Indiana or not, but it was on a road where there was pretty much forest in directions, with the sole exception of a few headlights. Now, she was still driving when she ended up getting a call from one of her friends, and her friend asked her a few questions. Now, she had a 2019 Chevy Cruze, so they were talking on speaker for quite a bit. But that was when all of a sudden Elizabeth saw something. It obviously was in front of the road, and she at first couldn't see exactly what it was, but she stopped at about a couple feet and pulled over. She looked to see that there was a girl. It looked like she was maybe in her teens or something, and she was standing on the side of the road. Now, Emily wasn't so sure about this woman and called her parents and asked about what she should do and stuff. Now, Emily approached the woman and asked her if she needed any help or anything, but whatever this girl didn't seem to do anything. She didn't even acknowledge Emily's approach. She was just staring as if she wasn't available or existent. Now, Emily went back to her car and grabbed her gun just in case if this girl had any intention of harming her. She wanted to be safe, so she walked up and had the gun ready just to be on the safe side. When she approached the girl all of a sudden just darts off into the road. Now, that was very strange since this woman may never first show back up. But when Emily got back and started driving, it took place at least a few minutes later, where she saw the exact same woman again on the side of the road. This time she pulled over, and luckily there was nobody behind her. She ended up rolling down her window and asked the woman if she needed any help again. But this woman didn't say anything. But then she just turned around and then ran back into the other direction, into the woods. Now, Emily was more confused as to why this woman was doing that. Was this some sort of prank or ambush or something? That was obviously one of Emily's concerns. So she ended up looking over and she couldn't see anybody. So she was more confused as to who this girl was and why was she doing this on the road. Now, she decided to maybe think that maybe it's just some lost woman and decided to continue to her way to the next town. When she continued on her way to the next town, when she got there, she ended up pretty much alerting the police about it at the rest stop, and of course told her parents about it. Her parents said they didn't see anything like this, and the cops ended up going to that road to investigate from where Emily saw the ghost, or whoever this woman was. The police did a search sweep throughout this whole place, but they couldn't find any traces of a missing woman or anything like that. Emily was convinced that it was something to be paranormal, since this woman never acknowledged her existence. What's really something that Elizabeth never had seen was why was this paranormal thing happening? She obviously told her parents, and basically they weren't sure as to what she was talking about, but they took her word for it. I think what Emily experienced on that road was definitely paranormal. So, this is not really the type of story to make you jump out of your seat, but it definitely has happened to one of my friends from school. Now, one of my friends at the time, his name was Shelby, and Shelby was a really sweet girl. She was very nice and she was very helpful with people, especially if they were feeling down or upset. As Shelby was going through the sophomore year of high school, something really messed up had happened to her. To make it a long story short, she was pretty much in bed, basically on her phone. What she was doing on her phone was she was basically texting a few of her friends, and they were talking about maybe just some assignment. Now it was around 8 p.m., so they were working on some assignment that they had prior to school. However, as she was doing that, that's when she ends up looking up and felt as if she was being watched. She obviously couldn't see anybody, and there was definitely no one looking through the window, so there was no chance of who was there. That's when she ended up ending the project early, saying that she had to get to bed early as she didn't feel the greatest. So her friends understood her pleas and she ends up leaving. As Shelby was pretty much on her phone, she was talking to her boyfriend. While she was talking with her boyfriend, asking him some questions about how his day was and stuff, that's when she ends up hearing what seemed to be like footsteps. Now, at first she thought that maybe it could have been her parents, but her parents were already in bed by now, so there was no way that it could be them. She ends up going out of her bedroom and checking her parents' bedroom. Sure enough, her parents were there, and they were sleeping. Now, this was around maybe 11 p.m., so she ended up going back to bed and closing her door. As she was on the phone with her boyfriend texting, that's when she ends up hearing what seemed to be like someone walking up towards their door. Now, she first thought that it could have been her mom or maybe her dad checking on her, but they didn't speak or say anything at all. They didn't even knock on her door. Now, this was getting a little creeped out for Shelby, so she asked if someone was there, but there was no reply. Nobody was there at the door, so she opened the door just to be sure, but there was absolutely no one there. She obviously was just confused and looked around thinking maybe her brother could have been pulling a prank on her, but of course she didn't find any traces of him around. That's when she just went back to bed. Fast forward around 1 a.m., she woke up obviously needing to use the bathroom, so she went to use the bathroom when suddenly she ends up hearing a knock at her bathroom door. She immediately opens it up and she didn't see anyone. There was no one there, and that was just really strange as she couldn't figure out who or what was making those knocks at the door. Whatever Shelby experienced was definitely paranormal, but at the same time she wasn't so sure if it was paranormal or not. But however, that is definitely the mystery that we are not sure of to this day.